I'm Savage here in my cave with another episode of Tested VR, and this one is all about painting, specifically the weathering painting of a prop. We build all sorts of stuff here at Tested, and part of building a thing often is painting a thing. And my particular favorite part of painting isn't all the color variances, it's not the clear coats, it's not the undercoats. For me, it's the weathering. It's the last pass that shows the witness marks of existence on something that I built. It is a really difficult part, but it's also way simpler than I think most people realize. And I think a lot of people are daunted by this step. And I'm hoping by the time I'm done with this demo, you feel less daunted. But I'm going to make a couple of suggestions. The first suggestion is, if you're interested in trying some of these techniques, just watch this video all the way through without trying to remember anything specific. Just take it in. That first pass without too much judgment is a really important part of the process for me. And I learned it from Tim Galloway's The Inner Game of Tennis. He was a tennis pro teaching someone how to get a certain shot, and he tossed, and they couldn't get it. And he said, well, then just without thinking, just watch me do this a few times. And they did. And then he said, okay, and he tossed a ball to them, and they did the move that he'd been showing them. So that's what I'm asking you to do. The first pass, just watch this all the way through. So without further ado, the first part of any weathering pass on a prop or something that I've painted is, for me, it's a wash. It is a wash of dark paint that calls out and pops out the details of whatever I'm painting. So if you can see this piece of a spaceship that I'm utilizing, it's got little panel lines, it's got little raised parts, and the same thing with this piece. Hitting this with a dark wash casts all of those into starker relief. And if you look around the world, much of the world has exactly this. Dirt gathers in the corners, and the corners is where we want to put it. Now, I have two specific different ways of doing a wash on a model part, and I'm going to show you both of them. One is using oil paint, and one is using acrylic paint. I don't have a preference one over the other, but it is instructive to see the difference and just to show you how I kind of workshop through this. The first thing I do before a wash is I put a clear coat over the paint. This is primed with a Tamiya lacquer primer. I just love that stuff. It dries really fast. But I'm going to give it a quick coat of clear matte finish, and that just provides a barrier coat. So as, well, inevitably, I frequently have to remove parts of a paint job because it doesn't go right, and you should be prepared for that. Having a barrier coat between my base coat means that I'm not taking off any of that original color. I have a protective layer in the middle. So, like I said, this is just a matte clear finish, and the Krylon clear finishes, they just dry faster than almost anything else. I love them. I've loved them forever. All right. And that's all it takes for the matte finish. That really is how quickly it dries to be handleable. That's one of the reasons I love it. Also, frankly, the matte finishes of today are way better than they were 20, 25 years ago when I was a young maker. It's a good time to be a maker because the paints are fantastic. Okay, we're going to start with the acrylic wash, and I'm going to put on some gloves because weathering is always filthy. Absolutely. Your hands will look like you've been digging in the dirt. So I like to put on some surgical gloves for this. Now, I've got the same colors for both of these tests. I have black and I have a burnt sienna. So we're going to get to see the same exact colors under these two different treatments. And the first one is the black. All So if you attempt to take a brush and dip it in the paint and just start hitting your model, I'm going to do that right now. This actually can work fine, but it can become difficult to then pull that paint off in a way that shows enough detail. So as I'm trying to pull this paint off, you can see it's like almost a little too dark in the corners there. So this is not how I apply an acrylic wash. I actually do a totally different method I'm going to show you. I'm going to pull some of this off. Now I'm just using a wet brush just to move the paint around. And this demonstrates one of my favorite weathering techniques, which is, well, you should know that there is nothing that I paint and weather that I don't think somewhere in the middle of the paint job that I'm totally screwing it up. Every single time. There is no paint job that I don't somehow at some point think, oh, I'm really just doing terrible at this and I don't know what I'm doing. You will too. Frequently, my favorite weathering jobs are when I mess something up so badly, I pull out like water or paint thinner and try and strip the finish off. And then in the stripping off of the finish, I end up with something that I really like. That's not half bad, but I'm going to show you a slightly better technique with the black wash. And that is, one, thinning out your acrylic with a little artist's medium. And this just extends it and thins it. That's one part. Adding a little water as well helps. The medium is a little better than the water because its consistency is better. And then what I've got here is a squirt bottle of isopropyl alcohol. So what I do is I hit the piece with isopropyl first, just getting a little bit of a spray all over it. Then I come in with my paint and I try not to be too consistent, but I just try and hit all over the place. And what the isopropyl alcohol does is where it's actually contacting the paint, it's thinning it out significantly. And in doing that, it's actually helping it settle into some little tiny interstices and corners. This also works great if you're spraying acrylic through an airbrush. Doing an initial squirt with isopropyl alcohol before you do that airbrush pass helps tremendously. Then I'll take a paper towel and start to pull this off, and you'll start to see how this paint job just sort of sits in the corners. Sometimes it's good to go in a singular direction because it sort of moves in the same direction. It looks like weathering based on speed. I'm trying to both hold this so you can see it and so I can see it. And the other thing that the isopropyl alcohol does is it keeps the paint wet enough that it doesn't get too dry on you. That's what was happening before when I used just the raw paint. It dries almost immediately, and then you've got to wet it in order to get it back off again. With the isopropyl alcohol, it actually extends the working life of the paint in its nice thin state so I can have some time to really work at it. And if you, let's see here. Okay, I'm gonna get serious about this for a second. You're going to end up with areas that you don't like and areas that you do, and those are going to change. And sometimes you're going to do one more thing to an area you do like and you're going to hate it. It's totally going to happen. Okay, so that is a first pass at a wash. I'm going to do a second one because I don't think that one's robust enough. And I'm going to do it here where I can see it. And I'm going to hit this again with some isopropyl. And I'm going to hit this again with a thin mix of paint. And I'm just going to go, on this pass, I'm just going to do the outside of this. I kind of want to see if I can get a separation. The reason I know this paint job isn't done is because when I look at this thing, it's still a little confusing visually to me. And this is a great way to like understand the composition of what you're painting. Like as you look at it, does it visually communicate what it is instantaneously? Then you're close. Does it still look like a bunch of separate parts and a bunch of paint? Then you got to work on it a little bit more. There's a way in which, like, I don't know if you've ever studied art history, but if you do, you'll learn that the Renaissance painters controlled where you were looking similarly to what great filmmakers do. They guide your eye through the canvas the way a great filmmaker guides your eye through a frame. And the same is true with our weathering job. We are like calling attention to certain details, and we're trying to hide crimes in other details. Now you can see there's a little bit, actually, let me just get this a little dried off. All right, so now when I look at this piece, I think it's a little too dark over here. And I think it's a little too splotchy over here. So I'm going to work on those two aspects. I'm going to get a fresh brush. I'm going to get a fresh... You cannot have too many paper towels with you at your station. That's for darn sure. Now I'm just going to put a little water on this brush instead of any paint. And I'm just going to try and start to muck with the paint that I can see and see if I can't get a more consistent finish. Now I'm just kind of moving around the paint that's here. And what I'm noticing is, like, because of both the barrier coat and the isopropyl alcohol, when I get a splotch that I don't like, I can kind of work at it and slowly kind of change that transition. You play around with this, you'll see what I'm talking about. It's hard to witness until you're doing it yourself, but this is how to kind of extend and play with those lines that I've done, right? I've used this darker wash around this detail to sort of make that detail pop, but the wash itself doesn't quite have the scale I want. So using the wet brush, I'm sort of moving it around a bit, drying it off until I get something that feels authentic. Seriously, look around the world at road signs. You'll notice everything's got like dirt in the corners and rust streaks running down. An old friend of mine who was a scenic painter used to just take pictures of all that stuff. And as soon as he was on a movie set, he would show those pictures to his art director and say, "Is this what you want it to look like?" And he'd be like, "Yeah!" He'd already had a lot of thinking about how to execute that paint job. Okay, so now I've got something that I think is much better. Mostly, they come out at night. Hit this with the paint again. Hit this with a blow dryer again. I mean, all right. Now, I don't know about you, but when I look at this, I still don't think this quite pops enough. So I'm actually going to do something different here. I'm going to put a little bit of isopropyl alcohol on my paper towel directly, and I'm going to use it to kind of pull off the paint that's on the high spots here. That's what it'll do, because I laid it down at the beginning. It'll allow me to pull up the paint. Ooh, yes, yes. Yeah. One more thing. Thank you. Yeah. All right. Here I've gotten to something that I care about, that I like, that I think is working. So now I think you can see that the value of the face of this here is slightly lighter than the value of the base below it. And that helps the center detail to kick, to pop a little more. And in that is kind of most of what I want to teach you about weathering. It's about making those details communicate visually quickly, compositionally, in the way that a Renaissance painter or a filmmaker might. Now that I've executed that, I'm going to go with a burnt sienna wash. And my technique is going to be quite similar, however, with a couple modifications because it's a secondary pass. Because this is a secondary pass, geez, I'm crow. Can you get any paint out of there? There we go. I guess I need some more burnt sienna. Because this is a second pass, sometimes I might even go into this primary pass and add another clear coat. And I think I'm going to do that here, simply because it'll really help this thing pop. Okay.
I'm just going through and looking for the trouble spots and fixing them before they cause me more trouble later.
I'm going to do one more thing before I do this. Actually, before I do the second pass, I want to do one more aspect of this. There's a part of this that I really like, and it's right up here in this corner. There's like this dark splotch. And I like how different that dark splotch looks than the rest of it. And it helps remind me of this key thing to remember about weathering is that nature is never symmetrical. You've always got to... There's a proclivity in weathering to keep doing washes and sort of an even balance, and you can just get lost in the weeds with that. You've got to be irregular about some of your weathering. So it's really important to make an effective weathering to actually add some really splotchy dark spot that's totally like completely different than all the rest. I'm going to add a little more. When you hit it with the isopropyl after you put the paint on, it tends to make it bead, and also it tends to make it creep into the corners, and it makes it easier to pull off. It makes it like it does all of these wonderful things. And so I'm just continuing to kind of like get this part to look stained, but also stained in scale. Little isopropyl on there. Ooh, oh, this is good. Okay, so and again, because I had this cloth covered with a little isopropyl alcohol, it's providing me this way of pulling off some high spots that's adding a whole bunch of extra detail, which I really like. So I've got a little isopropyl on here. You'll see when I wipe it across here, it peels some up. Yep. Same over here. Pulls it up. There we go. See that? There's all this subtlety to that. And you can just go in and keep... And again, you screw it up, swipe it off, try it again. There is no paint job in which I do not reach a point of despair. Every single one. So just get ready for that and it'll be great. So you see I've darkened this area a lot more. That sort of irregularity that it doesn't match this side, super important to a paint job feeling realistic to the audience. All right, let's give this a little bit of a clear coat.
I don't need a super thick, robust clear coat, just a little bit of one, that's all. All right.
For the clear coat, our procedure is going to be similar to the black wash, except we're going to be more bulleted about where it goes. So again, I'm going to add a little bit of artist medium to this to thin it out and extend it. I am going to, does that have, no? And that one doesn't either. Great, so that's the black one. A rust look is like, it's going to be all over the place, right? So there's going to be some like in the corners here. It's great to hit your rust first into the dark spots you've already been working on. That will feel kind of natural. And with the, I try not to be too regular with this kind of pass. I try and sort of like, yeah. And I try not to be too irregular too. You can be regularly irregular. Humans are terrible animals at being random. It is going to be the hardest part of solving the weathering issue. But I just put that down without doing the ISO. So I should have done that first. It's totally fine. And now I'm just going to be dabbing the same way you clean up a stain on the carpet. Not wiping, dabbing. Yep. And I'm slowly going to be pulling off parts of this paint job and adding, I mean, what you'll be noticing, like what I can see right here, is that immediately it's adding all this warmth to the paint job. It's adding this secondary color element, which is deepening the narrative. That's the only way to describe it. It is just like, you know, nature is not monochromatic. Weathering, there's no such thing as a weathering job that uses one color. Sure, if you had to, you could use one color, but 2, 3, 4, 5 colors even, the more you add to the mix, the more it potentially shows off the little details. Oh yeah, this is kind of great. Let's get that going there. And I really like these acid brushes for this kind of weathering pass. I really like how spiny they are. They allow me to move material. All right, so you can take a look at this initial pass of that secondary coat, that burnt sienna. And you can see how it definitely is like, you know, it sells an interesting story in the darker patches. And to be honest, I'd probably add, in a final paint job for a ship like this, I'd probably add some rust streaks depending upon how the ship was oriented. I'd probably go in and make some of these panels darker here and there. That is absolutely critical. You can even go in. One of the last detail passes on a ship that gets built, or that used to get built at Industrial Light and Magic, was actually pencil work. You actually go in and draw extra little panels in pencil on the panels just to pull out extra little details. The very last step would be specular highlighting, which would be using different semi-glosses and glosses to highlight little pieces. And these are light kicks that you will just barely sort of catch on your eye as this thing is moving through the frame, but they help sell all this scale. But just with these two colors, I think I've achieved a pretty respectable weathering job for this bit of a ship. And that is all in acrylics. 2 colors of acrylic, a little bit of water, isopropyl alcohol, and acrylic medium, and about 10-15 minutes. For real, if I was painting this part, I'd probably give myself a couple of hours all told to sit there and really just like keep looking at it, look at reference material, keep on adjusting it, pulling it off, putting it back on again. It's a process. Just got to go with it. And that is a weathering pass that took about 15 minutes, 2 colors of acrylic, some medium, and some isopropyl alcohol. I hope that this is useful to you. Please remember, despair is a bus stop on every paint job, so just get ready for it. We will have some more weathering videos on Tested VR, so watch out for those. Thank you guys for joining me for this little tutorial. I'll see you next time.